I don't think so.
Okay, you should be live on X now.
People handle it like that stuff. Yeah. Was letting the people do?
We are.
Okay, are we live? Yeah, there's some place to it. We're live? Great. Can you just be back up on the screen?
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is the first of a three-part class series that we are doing. By we, I mean myself and Jason Ross, who is just sitting off to my left, who will stick his face in and will be sort of alternating in and out as we go. But I want to thank all of you, whether you're watching online. This is being streamed to my YouTube and my X account. Yeah, so you may have just been coming around for the first time and you've seen that I'm somebody who's running against Richie Torres, and you thought, great, somebody is primarying Richie Torres or running against Richie Torres in the Bronx. Who is this guy? And you might have been, you might have, you might have come across the fact that I get called a LaRoucheite. Or as I had a pleasant conversation with someone yesterday in the streets of Norwood who said, "Oh, I like you, but I'm not a LaRoucheite." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. What have you heard about LaRouche?" And he said, "Well, he's an anti-Semite." And I said, "Well, what do you mean he's an anti-Semite? The stuff he wrote about the Jews." What was the stuff he wrote about the Jews? "Oh, I just read some stuff that he said about the Jews." He couldn't name anything specifically. I said, "Well, you know, a lot of that comes from the ADL. And because the ADL has now slandered everybody as an anti-Semite, he just said, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, then that makes sense because the ADL is super sensitive, and you know, if you give even a mild critique of Israel, they just label you as an anti-Semite." And so he said, "Maybe I need to do more reading." And so I'm hoping that this class series will be something that will enlighten the people who are coming around the campaign to understand the influence that the LaRouche organization has on the policies that we have on our website. And you know, if you go on our website, you go to our policy, a lot of it references some of LaRouche's economics, but exactly what is LaRouche's economics? And I will posit to you that everything you think you know about economics is most likely wrong, or at the very least, it's in the wrong direction of what economics actually is. One of the things that we're going to talk about in this class today, let's see, I'm sorry, people are texting me saying that they're waiting for me at the Bronx office, even though they're not there. It's okay. No, it's all right. But basically, what I was saying was what you may not understand about economics and why this plays such a factor in economics is the way in which you view human beings. And so what I hope to do with this class is to give you a different perspective of what economics actually is, why your view of mankind matters a lot, and whether or not you think people are a plague on this earth. And this will be a sort of introduction to understanding the role of people, understanding the role of creativity and the mind, and kind of outlining what it is we're here to do. And what we're doing with the campaign. Now, before I pass things off to Jason, I kind of want to go through what appealed to me about the LaRouche organization and why I'm still here. So first of all, one of the ways in which you could talk about LaRouche is his understanding of splitting the world between people who are Aristotelians and people who are Platonic thinkers. So what do I mean by that? Here is a painting of Plato on the left. He has his finger pointing up, and then you have Aristotle on the right, and the book is on his knee. Now, this is part of a larger image called the School of Athens, and this is where all of the greatest classical thinkers up to that point were basically meeting. You know, it was like a meeting of the minds of, you know, the simultaneity of all these great thinkers and all these great ideas in one big room coming together to discuss ideas. So you have Plato on the left and you have Aristotle on the right. And what exactly does this image show? This image shows the ideological divide or the philosophical divide between how both of these people thought. Now, I'll just pose this here to people here in the class. Has anybody heard of Aristotle before? Whether it was in your education or your schooling, or you know,
Yes, I've heard of Aristotle.
you've heard of Aristotle. What have you heard about him?
He was a philosopher.
That he was a philosopher. Okay. Anything else?
He taught, is that Alexander or he taught Alexander the Great or the Plato?
And feel free to speak up too, so that they can hear you. That's my
Oh, yeah. That he was a great teacher. He taught some Greek name. Alexander the Great.
Yes, absolutely. That right. He did, in fact, teach Alexander the Great, and he was a philosopher. And do you know much about what his philosophy was? And people in the chat are welcome to throw something into.
No, not really.
No, okay. Well, man. Yes. Sorry. I realize how easy I get distracted with noises in the room. Anyway, so Aristotle had there was a sort of epistemological divide with the early Greek philosophers about what is man exactly. And it centers around this question, right? Or at least this is how Aristotle expressed it. Can you read this for me, Tyler?
But is there anyone thus intended by nature to be a slave, and for whom such a condition is expedient and right? Or rather, is not all slavery a violation of nature?
So this is a question that Aristotle poses, right? You know, is there anyone by nature supposed to be a slave, and for whom such condition is expedient and right? Or is not all slavery a violation of nature? What do you think?
I think all slavery is a violation of nature.
You think all slavery is a violation of nature, right? So what did Aristotle think? Go ahead.
There is no difficulty in answering this question on grounds both of reason and of fact, for that some should rule and others be ruled is a thing not only necessary, but expedient. From the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection, others for rule.
So this is from Aristotle's book called Politics. And this is something that is taught to all intro philosophy majors, and Aristotle is often taught as like the prime philosopher that you're supposed to know. And he is also seen as like the biggest influence to all philosophers up till today, right? So this, what did you, can you summarize what the quote said, Tyler?
So the second quote,
Yes.
to summarize the second quote, I'd say that, hey, there are people who rule, and then there are people who are to be ruled over.
Yeah, right. So Aristotle is saying, for that some should rule and others be ruled is a thing not only necessary, but expedient, you know? So it's like, it has to be this way. And then he goes on to say, from the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection, others for rule. So what do you think about that?
So that sounds like he's saying there are natural hierarchies. That some people are born to wield power and others are born to be underpowered.
What do you think about that?
I think that that's wrong and unfair, and it kind of gives people a destiny that they have no control over.
Now let's see what Plato had thought. Now this is an excerpt from a Platonic dialogue called the Meno dialogue. This is between Socrates and Meno, where they are discussing what it means to know something, and the whole dialogue centers around how can you know something is true. And this is at a point where Meno says you can only learn from what someone else can tell you. In other words, if you're a teacher, you have to tell me what's right. Otherwise, I have no way of knowing what's right. And this is after an exercise where Socrates grabs one of Meno's slave boys, because Meno was an aristocrat. He's an oligarch, and he had slaves. And so Socrates grabs one of Meno's slave boys and he brings him to the beach, and they do a problem of geometry, which is called doubling the square. Now, we don't have the time to double the square today, but the point is the slave boy was able to figure out, not because somebody told him the answer, but he was able to figure out using his own mind the answer to a problem which Meno thought he wouldn't be able to solve because he wasn't quote unquote learned. So would you like to be Meno in this dialogue?
Sure.
Great. And I'll be Socrates. Thank you, Tyler. All right. So this is at the point where the slave boy figured out the answer, and they're talking about how did he figure out the answer. So Socrates starts, then if he did not acquire them in this life, in this them being the answer, isn't it immediate? You know, if people could like mute their phones, that'd be great. You know,
And then leave it muted forever.
yeah. And great, it doesn't matter. All right. So anyway, then if he did not acquire them in this life, then the being knowledge, right? If he did not acquire them in this life, isn't it immediately clear that he possessed and had learned them during some other period
It seems so.
when he was not in human shape?
Yes.
If then there are going to exist in him, both while he is and while he is not a man, true opinions which can be aroused by questioning and turned into knowledge, may we say that his soul has been forever in a state of knowledge? Clearly, he always either is or is not a man.
Clearly.
And if the truth about reality is always in our soul, the soul must be immortal, and one must take courage and try to discover, that is, to recollect what one doesn't happen to know, or more correctly, remember at that moment. So what do you think is the difference here with how Socrates views man versus how Aristotle views man?
I think Socrates has maybe a more positive outlook on what a man is and their, what they can be.
Right, because he's talking about a slave boy, right? You know, someone who was marked from the birth to be a slave, and he's talking about the slave boy has an immortal soul who has knowledge within him, you know, even before he was born. So this view of how he views a human being is already different than how Aristotle views people. So that is just something that I wanted to kind of put out there as just sort of what attracted me to continue working with the LaRouche organization, you know, because we're not Aristotelians. We don't believe that some people are just better than others. All right, Sarah here said, soul has forever been in a state of knowledge. Thank you, Sarah. But we're not somebody who believes that some people are just naturally better than others, and some people are just born to rule and others are born to be slaves. I and everybody in the LaRouche organization, and I think I would posit that every human being to some fundamental level knows this to be true, and either obscures it or is ignorant of it, knows that everybody is truly capable of genius and is capable of knowing something, no matter, regardless of the circumstances of their birth and who their parents are. We all have an immortal soul. Now, we will be coming back to this topic, but first, I want to pass it off to my friend Jason Ross to talk about who is Lyndon LaRouche. I keep talking about Lynn. I spoke a little bit about some of his philosophy and how it's influenced by Plato, this divide between Plato and Aristotle, but now I hope that Jason can
Recording in progress.
Go ahead, Jason. All right.
All right, I'm gonna share some images here. Oh, thank you so much.
Of course.
All right. So let's pose the question, who is Lyndon LaRouche? LaRouche was born in 1922, died in 2019. And he was multi-time presidential candidate. He created an international movement from scratch, devoted to the image of man that we heard in brief form in this exchange with Socrates. And he served in World War II. He saw directly British imperialism. He was stationed in India, in the Indian area. And he was in India, and he saw British soldiers massacre people that were protesting for their rights in India. So he ended the war with a real sense that what FDR had done was great, that the new leadership following him, Truman, wasn't, and that there was this real evil in the world that had to be corrected. So he, in his professional career, he focused he was a economic consultant, business consultant. And he was really focusing in his own work on what is the relationship between scientific discovery, between technology and the economy. How do you understand the value of a scientific breakthrough in the economy? Is it measured in dollars? How do you think about it? For example, the development of the steam engine. How much money was that worth?
Must have been a lot for the time.
Right. When you think about for the time was pretty long. I mean, we don't really use them very much anymore, but we use technologies that are derived from them. So this, instead of thinking about dollars, which is what you can use to buy things that exist today, think about how did you change the whole species? You got to think about economic value in this non-local way. So LaRouche built up a movement. He ran for president many times. Here is one of his campaign posters from 1976, and he ran as an independent. Here we have his campaign poster from 1992. Lyndon H. LaRouche, Democrat for president, the only opponent George Bush feared enough to put in prison. LaRouche was running for president from prison, federal prison. He was in prison from 1989 to 1994. And here's just this is from my time. I was involved in this presidential campaign of his. Following that, he created a political action committee and was obviously not afraid of making strong statements. There's the view of the Obama administration. But throughout all of this, it wasn't just a US focus, it was an international focus. So this is a LaRouche publication from the 70s, I believe, and it's many, many pages, and it goes through what are the projects needed to industrialize Africa. This is sort of a newer version that my wonderful colleague Hussein and I wrote a few years ago about how the new paradigm can impact West Asia and Africa. We have a second edition coming out soon. LaRouche was involved with President Jose Lopez Portillo of Mexico, you see on the left and on the right. LaRouche had a plan for Mexico, along with Brazil and other countries, to use the fact that they had so much debt owed to London and Wall Street that they should threaten non-payment as a way of creating a political shift. And Mexico went with it, but then the other countries didn't. Here on the right, you see President Lopez Portillo with Helga Sepp LaRouche. LaRouche was a friend of India. On the left is Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. The LaRouches met with her on more than one occasion. And this is from the early 2000s. This is President Narayanan, the fellow in gray in India. 1983, here's LaRouche in Bangkok, talking about a project that is still unbuilt and still very much needed in the world today, namely a canal across Thailand. So in the map on the left, we're looking at Southeast Asia here. For ships to go from China, you see the port of Hong Kong, for example, in the upper right, to get over to India or to Africa, they have to go all the way south down to Singapore and then come up in between Malaysia and Indonesia there. That's a choke point. It's narrow, the number of ships is limited for safety reasons, and it's approaching capacity. LaRouche had said what we should do is let's build a canal across Thailand. It can have plenty of capacity, it'll remove that bottleneck, and it'll be great for Thailand to develop. If they have all these ships coming through, it'll be wonderful. They can set up repair facilities and manufacturing and take advantage of this. A global view. This man had a truly global view. He proposed how a new international institution for development could remove poverty from the entire planet. I mean, really, why is there any poverty on the earth today? We don't know how to grow food. We don't know how to make houses. It's a choice. It's been a policy choice that there's still poverty. It's been deliberate. And so LaRouche this is in the 70s, had worked out an international development bank. You see, speaking there at the United Nations, that's Fred Wills, the foreign minister of Guyana, who put forward this proposal and the need for a new system at the United Nations. Here is LaRouche with a couple of scientists whose names I'm embarrassed to say I can't recall. Is that Teller on the left? No. Anyway, LaRouche with some nuclear scientists. He said that the greatest breakthrough technologically that was on the horizon was nuclear fusion. That is recreating the process that's in the sun and doing it here, but without a huge explosion, like a bomb. But if we could use that to make power, then we could do so much for the economy and so much for people. Follow-on publication, 21st Century Science and Technology. In 1983, Ronald Reagan took a page from LaRouche when he proposed to the Soviet Union what he called the Strategic Defense Initiative. He said that the idea that US and the Soviet Union would never have a nuclear war because if either of them started it, the other side, everyone would shoot all their missiles, everyone would die. It would be called mutually assured destruction. And this supposedly made the world safe. LaRouche didn't think that was very safe. He said, how about this? How about we work with the Soviet Union to make a system to shoot down these missiles? Because some other country could get a nuclear missile. There could be an accidental launch. There's a lot of things besides, blowing up the whole world. And so he said, we should do this together. We'll be able to make it ourselves safe from nuclear war. And we're going to get all sorts of new technologies that are going to improve the economy and living standards when we figure out how to do this. The Soviet Union turned Reagan down. In 1988, as part of his presidential campaign, LaRouche spent spent a lot of money buying a half-hour TV advertisement. You wonder where Ross Perot got the idea. Well, here it is. He bought a half-hour TV ad to talk about the woman on Mars, on the need to have a vision of colonizing Mars and what the stages would be for that and how it would have incredible positive implications for our economy here on Earth. Going to the moon was extremely economically productive. In the early 2000s, under the terrible George Bush administration, 9/11, the Iraq War, LaRouche recruited quite a number of young people. He worked in music. I think I've got enough of that. Okay. This is the World Land Bridge proposal. So with the fall of the Soviet Union, LaRouche has said, well, look, this is a great opportunity. Instead of this iron curtain and this split world where Eurasia is split in half, connect the place. Make land connections. Don't rely on the ocean. With the ocean, there's a few ports that control things that benefit the most, the coastal regions. But if you're building rail and road and development corridors, then all those poor areas, which are generally much poorer way inland, now they can become rich because they've got, they're connected to transport. On his first international trip after getting paroled from prison in 1994, LaRouche went to Russia. There he is speaking at the committee of the Russian parliament on the right, and he's giving a lecture at I think a university or some kind of think tank on the left. Here's Helga Zepp-LaRouche in Jiangsu province in China. You can read the sign there, the eastern terminal of the Eurasia Land Bridge. This was our idea. This is the big report from 1997 that EIR, the LaRouche publication, put out on the Eurasian Land Bridge. This is a regrettably low-res image of the maps in it. A global plan. This is our expanded version. How can we link the world together? Can we cross the Bering Strait and link Russia and Alaska with road or rail or both? What does that do to the shape the world takes? So in 2013, President Xi Jinping of China proposed the Belt and Road Initiative. Here's one map of some of its projects that some think tank made on the right. This is when you look at this is the world land bridge coming into fruition via the most powerful economy in the world. They took his advice. They took LaRouche's advice. So he's got really a phenomenal track record in terms of political activism and also in terms of economic thinking. Because on all of these projects, he's keeping the focus on the physical economy and on science and not on stock markets or something like that.
All right, so now we're going to go on to here. Now that you have a little primer on who Lyndon LaRouche was, it is, well, hopefully I don't. It's just, Lynn passed away a few years ago, but you know his ideas are very much still here with us. So, I just had to clarify that because I had some looks in the room, like he's still here. So now I want to talk a little bit about some of the policies that predated Lyndon LaRouche that were important to the development of the United States' economy and how Lyndon LaRouche then elaborated and built on that. And one of those important revolutions was in 1776 with the American Revolution, because we are approaching the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. And there's a lot that comes with that. There are tons of people who say that the founding fathers were just slave owners who were doing this for their own self-interests and did not care about, you know, other people. They were just tired of being taxed to hell and that they wanted to have their independence from the British so that they could continue to be slave owning feudal lords. You know, and I'm sure that may be a deep held belief that a lot of people have, whether you're watching this or whether you're here in person. You know, you may not have a very favorable view of America as a whole. And on a cursory view, if you are new or if you, you know, only look at the bad that the country has done, I can understand why you would have that view. But for those of you who've been to my Bronx office, you will notice that we have paintings and pictures up of people like Edgar Poe, Gouverneur Morris, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, and we display those proudly on our office. And the reason we do is because these people were anti-slavery and they were pro-development, particularly Gouverneur Morris, the man who wrote the words, "We the people of the United States," otherwise known as the preamble to the Constitution. And in it, he talks about this idea of a general welfare. Now, before I get right into that, do people know who this man is here?
Oh, that's Adam Smith.
Yes, that is Adam Smith. Do people know? Sarah said economist. Yes. Do people know what he's known for, famous for? You might have learned about him in your high school class of civics or history.
Was it The Wealth of Nations?
It was The Wealth of Nations. Yes, that's right. Now, has anyone here actually read The Wealth of Nations? I've had the displeasure of reading it, you know, in preparation for this class. And, you know, this will align perfectly with what I had presented before about your view of man. See, one thing that I had neglected to share with all of you is that Aristotle, apart from believing that some people are born to rule and some people are born to be slaves, the other thing is that he believed that we are driven by our impulses. You have to eat, right? You have to survive. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your family, and you have to reproduce, right? That's just your natural bodily functions. What do people think about that? Are we driven primarily by instinct?
I would say so, primarily.
You would say so, primarily. Okay. Any other thoughts? Either here or in the Zoom? Are we driven mostly by our instincts? No, we are also driven by what we know is best for ourselves and others. That is what Sarah said here. Robert said, "Hi everyone, this is okay." They just wanted to say that they're happy that I'm running against Richard Torres. Thank you. I will read your message at the end. And Chris Kelly says, "No, our creativity." All right, well, so coming back to Adam Smith and as you said, the Wealth of Nations, I wanted everybody here to read a quote from Adam Smith. So the first quote I'm going to show, Samantha says, but what is best for yourselves and your family is also instinctual.
Oh,
Mm. It's
my
also
instincts are never wrong.
There you go.
I would say creativity is instinctive. Well,
You would say creativity is an instinct as well. Okay. Okay. So Diana says here, I believe that it is the majority of the time, when those impulses are satisfied, we are then able to rise above those primal instincts. Sarah says, what is the difference between conscience and instinct? Does anyone want to take a crack at that? By the way, I'm not an expert in everything Lyndon LaRouche has done or said, but Jason is.
I,
If
I would say one way to see the difference between instinct and conscience would be that fulfilling your instincts always feels good. It's always a temporary pleasure, no matter what. I mean, even being angry and you're like in that raw moment, seeing red, it feels good. You feel like you're doing the right thing.
Mhm.
Or conscience is drawing the line and saying maybe, oh, this may feel good, but it is not. It's
Mhm.
it's stepping outside of that personal pleasure, the drive for personal pleasure.
Anybody else?
That was a comment.
Yes, there's a comment that came in from Samantha who said, I would say that your conscience arises consciously and instinct is more primal.
but don't they intersect once we try to intellectualize our final desires?
Can you repeat that again for the
Would you say that they kind of intersect when we try to intellectualize our primal desires?
what does that mean? Intellectualize our primal desires.
So we try to think about, hey, I need this because, this is what we need to live. So it's actually good and it's rational that I engage in this anger because I justify it as it's righteous anger, right? Even though it is fulfilling a base need, right?
Okay. Well, let's take a concrete. Oh, did you?
Well, I was gonna say, like, sometimes we make a decision or we have a view based on, feelings. But if someone asks you why you took that view, you're not gonna say, you might come up with a reason. That's what you're saying. You might come up with some reason for it. And it's like, okay, you might try to convince someone else it's a good idea with that reason, but that's not why you decided to do that.
So let's take a concrete example here. It's 1776. You've just declared war on the British, and you have a question. What kind of a government are we going to have? Not only that, how are we going to feed our people? I mean, we're talking about breaking away from one of the largest empires that was sustaining us, feeding us, that gave us slavery as one of our main market drivers. A lot of the southern states relied on slavery as a mode of production. This is just what they were taught by the British, and you're talking about breaking away from basically your mother's teat. And now it's like, oh, we have to stand on our own 2 feet. What is an economy? What will our economy be? So in those discussions, you have people like Alexander Hamilton, Gouverneur Morris, and Robert Morris, the real American founding fathers, discussing their idea of economics. But before we get to them, there was an attempt to try and sabotage and subvert their ideas of economics by first introducing Adam Smith's and some of his ideas. So I have 2 quotes here from Adam Smith, and we're going to look at them both closely. This first quote is not from The Wealth of Nations, but rather from the Theory on the Moral Sentiments of Man. Can you read this for us, Tyler, who you've been doing such a great job, or if someone else wants to, but Tyler's been doing such a great job.
You're good.
So
The administration of the great system of the universe, the care of the universal happiness of all rational and sensible beings, is the business of God and not of man. To man is allotted a much humbler department, but one much more suitable to the weakness of his powers and the narrowness of his comprehension. the care of his own happiness, of that of his family, his friends, his country.
Can you tell me in plain English what that meant?
Basically, like God is in charge of, the bigger plan, and it's up to us to just, deal with our family, deal with our carnal desires of, hey, I just have this small idea of taking care of myself, my family, and maybe my friends and those people in my community.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I think that very similarly as what I said earlier, it kind of creates a destiny for you and makes your destiny smaller when, maybe life could be bigger. Maybe our destiny could be bigger than what we're allowing ourselves to believe by believing these.
So do you agree with Adam Smith or you disagree with Adam Smith?
I'd say I disagree with that.
So you say, okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts? They can put them in the chat or here.
Well, it's trying to say that man can't think, that has to rely on the so-called God, and that there's no thought, man, to create something, initiative to substantiate the better quality of life.
Now, Sarah here said, in a way, it sounds like humility before God, but it also sounds like Aristotle's conception of ruler and rule.
Sounds
Joe.
like a swindle.
I thought I saw a hand raised. Okay, let's read this other quote by Adam Smith. Hold on. There's another comment here from Samantha. Sounds to me he is narrowing down the definition and capabilities of humans. Now, this quote is from The Wealth of Nations. This is
No, this is still the theory.
Oh, this is still this. No. Okay, you're right. The next one is the Wealth of Nations. Excuse me. But please go on, continue, Tyler.
But though we are endowed with a very strong desire of those ends, it has been entrusted to the slow and uncertain determinations of our reason to find out the proper means of bringing them about. Nature has directed us to the greater part of these by original and immediate instincts. Hunger, thirst, the passion which unites the two sexes, the love of pleasure, and the dread of pain prompt us to apply those means for their own sakes, and without any consideration of their tendency to those beneficent ends which the great director of nature intended to produce by them.
Can you tell me again in plain English what this means?
That humans are animals, that they're based animals with these strong urges and desires, and we're not capable of higher thinking. And like Jason said, that we may justify these things afterwards, rationalize them, but at the very end of the day, it's the belief that we are simple animals.
Anybody have any other thoughts?
God made me do it.
God made you do it.
God made me do it, and it's for the good.
And
It's for the good.
But we do get hungry and we do get thirsty, right?
I ate the whole pie. God made me do it. For the good, that's
For
right.
the good. All right. Okay, now this one is from The Wealth of Nations. And this is from the beginning of his book, where he is talking about what makes the productive labors of man potent, like what defines productive labor. And he's talking about how do you actually measure value? And he says, what makes something valuable and also what drives us, right? And oh, hold on, there's a comment here. What Smith is saying is that he believes that the basic task of the individual is to take care of himself and his society, that morality is something that belongs to priests, theologians, etc. The basic business of a society is that we're to look out for ourselves and what's best for our immediate tribe. And to put it not nicely, we just have an obligation to look out for number one. That's why England built a slave empire on slavery and ripping off India and Africa, but that's the way God meant it to be. Someone asked a question, Estevao Damascena asked, did the first quote you showed influence the US Constitution when Jefferson also included the pursuit of happiness as an endowed right of people? Jason, I think, is going to write that one down. He's going to, and he will come back to that. Diane Batag says all these folks that are caving on the question of genocide are avoiding the pain of what the oligarchs will think of them, or just their neighbors. So now I want to end the. Go ahead.
I think the first quote also there's a assumption about the relationship of man and God. It's actually a theological statement.
Suzanne says that she believes that in the first quote that this is making a presumption about the relationship between man and God. Our relationship to God.
Yeah, there was a big fight in Britain at the time, which Leibniz took a very different position about man's relationship to God, as being man's in the image and likeness of God, so therefore man is creative. And this idea of pursuing jointly the idea of creativity is an expression of your relationship to God. Whereas the position of Smith and others is that God is like a king and dictates man who is a servant. So that's what I feel is implied.
So who would like to read the next quote? This is from the Wealth of Nations now. Okay. This is 1776. We're about to, or we have already declared war against the British. We want our independence, and Adam Smith publishes The Wealth of Nations. And for those of you, by the way, who also studied U.S. history around the time I did, this gets brought up to me in conjunction with the American Revolution. Maybe this happened to you as well, that when you learn American history, one of the first people you learn about too is Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations. This was written at the exact same time as the revolution was happening. But regardless, who would like to read this quote? Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
It is common to all men and to be found in no other race of animals, which seem to know neither this nor any species of contracts. Nobody ever saw a dog make a fair and deliberate exchange of one bone for another with another dog. Nobody ever saw one animal by its gestures and natural cries signify to the other, this is mine, that's yours. I'm willing to give this for that.
There you go. So, what do people think?
Seems like he's saying that what makes us man is our ability to exchange goods.
There you go.
And to define what is mine, what is yours.
Right.
Delineation.
Right.
That's my cake.
There you go. So, man is being able to make deals, which is why Donald Trump is the greatest expression of it. But let's look at an economist here, or a statesman, who actually defined the American Revolution and economics, and what would then lay out the foundation for the real American system of economics, which I think is kind of defined here by these two quotes. Which who would like to read this here? By the way, do people know about Alexander Hamilton other than the musical? So look at the year he was born. He was born in 1755, although that's disputed because some people say he might have been born in 1757. It's actually not clear if it was 55 or 57. But if it's 55, he's 21 years old when the revolution starts. If it's 57, he's 19 years old when the when the revolution starts. So you just have to think about the sort of what he's involved with at the time that the revolution is kicking off, and also the stuff that's happening before the revolution, right? What was happening in 1768 when he's, approximately 13 or 11 years old, and what was happening, in 1774, 75, 76, and what was his involvement to that? You have to think he's doing this all in his teenage years. So now this is a report that he wrote in 1791 called the Reports on Manufacturing. Who would like to give a stab at reading this? All right, Harry.
Yeah. This also is of greater consequence in the general scale of national exertion than might perhaps on a superficial view be supposed, and has effects not altogether dissimilar from those of the circumstance last noticed. To cherish and stimulate the activity of the human mind by multiplying the objects of enterprise is not among the least considerable of the expedients by which the wealth of a nation may be promoted. Even things in themselves not positively advantageous sometimes become so by their tendency to provoke exertions. Every new scene, which is open to the busy nature of man to rouse and exert itself, is the addition of a new energy to the general stock of effort. Keep on. The spirit of enterprise, useful and prolific as it is, must necessarily be contracted or expanded in proportion to the simplicity or variety of the occupations and productions, which are to be found in a society. It must be less in a nation of mere cultivators than in a nation of cultivators and merchants, less in a nation of cultivators and merchants than in a nation of cultivators, artificers, and merchants.
So what was he saying there?
There,
Or anywhere in the quote?
he's saying that there should be some, if I understand correctly, some regulation on the entrepreneurial activities of people in proportion to the economic interests of a nation in a society, and that it should be expanded or contracted in due times. And also with the addition with different occupations like the merchants, the artificers, which I don't know what an artificer is, and I forgot the first cultivators. Yeah.
So anybody else have anything to say about the quote?
Yeah, well, also that in the very last two sentences, it must be less in the nation of mere cultivators and merchants. We need a variety of enterprises, people working as manufacturers, merchants. We need to give people the chance to cherish and stimulate the activity of their mind in these various occupations. So,
Anybody else have any thoughts, or in the Zoom too, you can type them out. We have a whole thing about Hamilton might have been mulatto, right?
Just that he says the whole point of the economy is to stimulate the activity of the human mind. It says it right there. So
Directly,
It-
the wealth of nations.
that's the wealth of nations, to stimulate the mind, and it comes out in these various ways. And there are different levels of economies, but that's the goal. And to expand it is to do that.
So, contrasting these two sort of thoughts going on at the time, right? You have Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, and he believes that people are just supposed to look out for themselves only. Does Alexander Hamilton's view fit with Adam Smith?
Not at all.
Right? Because, and even then here, I think he says, even things in themselves not positively advantageous sometimes become so by their tendency to provoke exertion. Sometimes we might invest in things that might be experimental. We might not know if they do work or don't, but the point is they cause people to be creative and exert themselves, right? Like, for example, what about something like nuclear fusion? We don't actually have productive fusion yet. I know that we've made some groundbreaking discoveries now where we are producing more of an output than an input with nuclear fusion. And that requires a lot of money to continue to invest, and continues to innovate to make nuclear fusion a reality. Yet it's not a reality yet. But why is that still profitable, even if we won't see any immediate returns on investment?
Yeah.
Right?
well, also he's saying that the government itself should intervene to carry this out. Whereas Adam Smith, I think, would say, well, there's an invisible hand, just let people run about, do their own kind of thing, and things will just naturally work out. But no, we need to have an intention for the economy.
Mhm. So now, for my friends in the Bronx and for others, I'd like to kind of make this, let's bring this now to the now. When we're talking about increasing the wealth of nations, what kind of economy do we have now? Do you think we have an economy where we are investing in the creative minds, as Hamilton would say, into the wealth of nations? Or do we currently have an economy where people are just looking out for themselves and others? Do we have an Adam Smith economy, or do we have a Hamiltonian economy right now?
One is dog eat dog, and the other one's more humanitarian, because you're out to watch out for your back and your neighbors. For the better good, not just for like slavery. Aristotle said.
Sarah said, no question, we're in an Adam Smith situation. Samantha said, it's split. We have both, one for the elite, the other for the lay people. Estevao said, could you clarify what Hamilton meant with national exertion? What do people think?
Say it again.
What did Hamilton mean when he talked about national exertion?
I like that better than GDP.
Well, go ahead. You were to say something? No. Think something like, I guess back then would have been the Erie Canal project, but how much labor and how much effort would it take to build a high-speed rail network that could connect the entire United States from the east to the west coast, down to the southwestern states, down south, all the way to Florida, up to Maine? That's a national project. That's going to require everybody in the country, because you're talking about going across municipalities, across states, right? That's going to be something at the national level that will require motivation nationally. Everyone's going to have to be on the same page for this. That they're gonna, that everyone will have to want to be on board with this, basically, right? So, people in Florida have to think it's important for them to have a high-speed rail, just as somebody up in Maine, just as somebody in South Dakota. And I think that's what Hamilton means by a national exertion.
We could use a land bridge over 17 when it gets jammed back.
We could use a land bridge over the Hudson River.
There you go. Sarah said national, meaning a planned economy for the whole country with great projects that engage many people. So like, for example, the New Deal, FDR's Great New Deal, which it basically reindustrialized and remodeled the entire United States. And of course, or even something simpler like Eisenhower's model for a highway system, which I know you could maybe debate as to whether or not how productive that was, because maybe it should have been high-speed rail. But the fact is that you had a big national project, required everybody from every state, and it benefited everybody. That's what I think Hamilton means by national exertion. But now let's talk about are there different kinds of, how should I say? So we all agreed that we have, or some of us agreed that we have a dog-eat-dog economy. Sarah said, no question, we have an Adam Smith level economy, right? But wait a minute. What does economic development actually mean in today's context, right? If you are, let's say, the mayor of New York City, the governor, or even the president, right? You want to give jobs to people. People need jobs. And what's the best way to make a job? You build stuff. Because you got to hire people to build the stuff, and you've got to hire people to maintain the stuff that you build, manage it, clean it, that stuff, right? This is, a great economic driver, right? You build stuff, right? Well, this is our great mayor, greatest mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, who they are now in the Bronx preparing to build a casino in Ferry Point Park. In one of the poorest places in the country, they are talking about bringing economic development, right, to the Bronx. And the Bronx borough president has said that, while a casino may have its ups and downs, overall it's great because it will allow the money to stay in the community, right? So if we all live in the neighborhood, we all get to spend our money at the casino and it stays within the neighborhood, right? And I believe it was either Eric Adams or Vanessa Gibson who had likened this to Malcolm X's theory of how we have to have our own businesses and our own neighborhoods and our own economy.
You don't put up a wall or anything?
So
More economic beneficial than the casino.
I had the pleasure of I was discussing this casino with some Albanians in the Bronx, and I was talking with, an elderly gentleman. He was 60 years old or so, and he was telling me that he thought that a casino would be great after I was waxing eloquently about how a casino is bad for the community. And he had said to me, a casino is good because I will have a job at the casino. He said, I've been unable to find work for a very long time now. So, with this casino, I'll be able to work in it. And I said, what would you be doing at the casino? And he said, well, I can cook and I can clean. And I will be paid $25 an hour for cooking and cleaning at the casino. And that is the job I will have at the casino. And so even before we got into the argument about morality, well, should we even have a casino? Isn't this wrong? Isn't this a vice? I had posed to him, well, wait a minute. What if instead of getting paid $25 an hour to serve shrimp platters and clean up after people who are gambling and doing God knows what, at a casino, what if you were getting paid $25 an hour to cook and clean at a vocational school where young men and women will be the first of the new Space Civilian Construction Corps generation? What I mean by a Space Civilian Construction Corps is a work program of 2 years where people between these ages, 18 to 26, will be involved in education. So they'll learn, if they're illiterate, they'll become literate, and they'll become the engineers, the carpenters, the electricians, the welders, the surveyors. They will become city builders in a 2-year intensive program that'll be federally funded. And you will be cooking and cleaning after these young people. And you'll still be getting paid $25 an hour. What is the value of your labor at that point? Is the $25 an hour that we are paying you to cook and clean after young people who will be learning how to build fusion energy, how to rebuild your city, how to build new cities and create advanced forms of technology, is that the same $25 that'll be given to you if you're working at a casino, making shrimp platters, serving champagne flutes to people, and just letting people gamble away their money? And he said, it's a good idea, but the government's too corrupt. It'll never happen. They're more inclined to build a casino, so I have to look out for myself. What do people think about that?
It's the way most people think, I think.
Do people agree with me that $25 an hour at a vocational center means something different than $25 at a casino?
Yeah.
But is it? Go ahead.
I can agree with you both, right? Like the $25 that you're proposing are, I guess, a great idea, right? And it would lead to investment down the line. But we don't have that. They're literally building the casino right now. They're not building the center.
Right. That's right.
But who are they? And who are we? Why should we just sit there and let them do what's bad?
So Sarah says, it shows you how much the economy affects the way we see ourselves, our options, how we can live. Samantha says, I agree, but it depends on the priority of the person you are talking to. $25 is $25 when you have to feed kids. That's also true.
Mhm.
And like Tyler said, the casino's coming. The vocational center isn't. So what do you do in this situation?
Jose Vega.
So this is where I kind of want to now transfer back to Jason. Oh, go ahead.
Say one thing, which is also, if you think about the future, what is that community gonna be like in 10 or 15 years?
Mm.
You said this guy is 60 years old, so what's gonna happen to his grandchildren under those two circumstances? So if you think about even going back to what we started with, looking after your family or your community or your nation, there's nothing beyond the immediate, like what's going to happen next week, what's going to happen a year from now, what's going to happen with my family, my community, my loved ones in the future.
Absolutely. What Lynn said, for those of you who didn't hear, she was talking about the investment of the future. What about the future? If this 60-year-old does work in a casino for the next 15, 20, 25 years, what will his grandchildren's future look like? It doesn't affect them, or it'll affect them negatively, as opposed to if our Albanian friend was working at a vocational center where these young people would go and build new cities, their grandchildren's lives would be completely different, just based on whether or not you build a casino or a space civilian construction corps center.
And the
Go-
value of his labor is completely different. I mean, he's getting the same amount, but what is he actually doing there?
Mhm. All right, so now I'm going to pass things back to Jason because we're going to explore this question a little bit more about, well, what is value per se? How do you determine the value of someone's labor? And for that, we're going to go back to Jason.
One more thing on this casino, in terms of thinking about the value of big projects that change the country, one thing that LaRouche would often say is that people from his generation, the World War II generation, the New Deal generation, also I guess before him, they could go to some big project. They could go to the Hoover Dam with their kids and their grandkids and say, I built that for you. They could point to the power lines that were built through the Rural Electrification Agency, and they could say, I built that for you. They could point to the schools and the post offices and the parks, and they could say, I built that for you. This Albanian guy would say, I built this so you could lose all your money. So
Well, put some vices.
what's your value? So I want to mention something about who is today's Adam Smith? Where is today's Aristotle? Who today is putting forward the kinds of ideas that cause people not to grow, that hold people back? Well, here's one example. This guy. Does anyone recognize him?
Isn't he that animal planet guy?
He's that animal man, yes.
Yeah.
Someone read what he says here, please.
The human population can no longer be allowed to grow in the same old uncontrolled way. If we do not take charge of our population size, then nature will do it for us.
Sounds like he doesn't really want that to happen. He'd rather take charge of it. This comes from an idea that's old. 1798, Thomas Malthus. Oh, wow. Samantha says, oh, that sounds like Malthusian philosophy. What do you know? Again, Thomas Malthus. So did someone read the quote up top from Thomas Malthus?
Power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to produce subsistence for man that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race.
Now, when he says the power of population versus the power of the earth to produce, he's talking about the power of the growth of population is going to outpace the power of production. We're going to run out. The Club of Rome issued a report in 1972 called The Limits to Growth. And here's a quote from that. Would someone please read it?
As the present growth trends in world population, industrialization, pollution, food production, and resource depletion continue unchanged, the limits to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years.
So we're more than halfway there to 100 years since this forecast. But how did they do a good job in bringing this up? Are we have we reached the limits of growth?
Well, we got another 50 years.
I guess we have to find out.
Yeah, we have to find that out.
The funny part is that in those 50 years, if you ask how much do we have in terms of resources, he says they say resource depletion is a problem. What makes something a resource?
It's useful.
Okay. So let's say somebody found some diamonds that are 20 miles deep in the Earth's crust. Are those a resource?
I mean, how bad do we need those diamonds?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is it going to be worth going to get them? That's what makes something actually a useful resource instead of just like what a geologist would study, like a mineral deposit. Whoa, oh, here's a rock. Okay, if you can do something with it, now it's a resource. So we make resources. We don't just diamonds.
Can we make diamonds though?
But it's shiny.
What's the other thing too? We can just make the diamonds. So yeah, diamonds are ridiculous. I mean, let's make it. Um. Whoops, forgot what I just said.
Come on, what makes something a resource?
Oh, yeah, right. Thank you. What makes something a resource? We make it a resource, the mind. Now, the way that we do this, oh, actually, let me see. There's a couple of chats that came in. Diamonds are also good cut-ups.
Well, I think that because they use diamonds.
For drills.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah,
true.
so you need, also, I think lasers far in, don't they?
So I want to take a look at a comparison of how our species is different from all life, other life, but also kind of the same as it. So here's a chart. Does anyone know what this might be a chart of? Obviously, there's many answers. There could be. What do you think I'm showing here?
Population growth,
Population of what?
human beings.
Okay, human population growth. Zoom. Okay. Any other ideas?
Could also be an ant population because or rabbit population.
If you
You put like 2 rabbits in there and it'd become 100 by the end of the week.
right, it's like if rabbits were first created at the beginning of this chart. No, yeah, okay. So maybe it's a long time chart.
Diane said energy consumption.
Energy consumption. Okay. Well, it really does look like on a whole lot of these things. This is a chart of mammal biodiversity over the past 150 million years. So it's a chart of how many different kinds of genera, how many different kinds of creatures are there, how varied is life, mammalian life.
Over how many years?
150 million.
There's another about what makes something a resource.
Okay.
Yeah.
We get what makes something a resource is the fact that we need to access them, material things, not only once, but all the time in order to have a fair standard of living. Yeah, you're right. We need these resources in an ongoing way. You don't burn oil. Well, you can only burn oil once, so you need to get some more. So that's the biosphere expressing a form of creativity and growth. Now, here's the chart. Maybe you were expecting or thought it was. This is what Margaret said. This is human population. And it's almost going like a vertical line now. Except that actually, if you zoom in, it's not. So it's leveling off. Population, the rate of growth of population growth has been decreasing, actually, I think for a couple of decades already. So we do something that takes life hundreds of millions of years. How do we do that? Here's an example. This is a chart from 1830 to about the present of how much land is used per person for agriculture. Overall, you can see it's definitely gone down. Why has it gone down? Got better at farming. Got better at farming. It's not that people ate a lot less. We don't need so much land to make the same amount of food. Why? What are some of the improvements that made farming more productive?
Technology,
Yeah, like what kinds? What are some examples of things that
machinery,
Fertilizer.
GMOs.
fertilizer,
Nitrogen.
GMOs, nitrogen, fertilizer,
Irrigate.
irrigation, crop cycles, just having a science of what you plant. Okay, yeah, those are all examples. Another thing would be transportation or refrigeration. If less of your food is going bad, then you don't have to produce as much, still feed the same number of people.
Oh, that's interesting. I just realized as the population went up, but the amount of land we use for farming has gone down.
The amount that we use per person has gone down. Yeah.
Wow.
Here's a look at just the recent, since 1961. You can see just this, big change in some areas. So what this means, this leads into an idea of one way of measuring economic value, the state of an economy. So Lyndon LaRouche said, why don't you take a look at the potential population density of a culture, or the potential relative population density, because some parts of the earth are easier to live in than others. How many people can you support in a given area of land? And we saw very clearly with that agricultural chart that we can increase the number of people that can be fed with the same amount of land area through technological improvements. Samantha points out in the case of Africa, which had the most marked decline in land use per agricultural land use per person, the land allocation for families is an issue. The amount that they are able to grow on has been exponentially decreasing over generations. Okay, so part of this also could be running out of land and maybe not having as much or having to shift away from meat, which uses more land. Okay, so potential relative population density. How many people can you support? What is the economic value of your activity in terms of changing that value? Is what you're doing with your life going to increase the power of our species as a whole to live on this planet and beyond? Great. Okay. Here's another example, energy. This is a chart from 65. So we have China in red, USA in blue. This is the amount of energy per capita. How much energy does each person use per year? So did you know that in the US, we're using basically the same or even we're using less energy per person than in 1971? I think a lot of people would think that we're using more. So how is it possible that for per person, we're using less energy, given that we've got, computers and so much more electronics? What's going on?
Efficiency.
Efficiency, okay, that's part of it, efficiency. Lights are way more efficient, for example. What are we doing much less of now than we did in the 70s? Right, manufacturing. You shut down factories, there goes your energy use. If we had production and manufacturing in this, we would have blackouts all the time based on the number of power plants we have. We couldn't support it. We're gonna need to build a lot to industrialize. Here's specifically electricity use per capita. Same kind of time frame. So for electricity, okay, we are using a little bit more electricity per person than in the 80s. That's basically stable. Look at China, look at that increase. It's amazing. Here's one more chart. This is electricity as a percentage total energy. So of all the energy that you're using, how much of it was electricity as opposed to what are some other ways that we use energy besides making electricity? What else do we use energy for?
Heat the house.
Heating your house, okay?
Cooling your house.
Cooling your house, that is probably with electricity, for sure.
Refrigeration,
That's electricity, something besides electricity.
Gas in the car.
Old-fashioned
Cars,
cars.
trucks, engines, ships, that's right, yeah, that's a big use of energy. Solar makes electricity. So, but what part of what this is, so total energy would include the natural gas that you're using. And then some of that energy you get back as electricity. So you convert your energy into electricity. And look at China. China's outpaced the US at this point. More of their energy use is electricity per capita than here. So what this represents is to use a concept from LaRouche, is energy flux density. What is the intensity of the power source that you have? What's the intensity of the way you're applying that power source to production? So can anybody think of any examples of how we produce things in a more intense way than 200 years ago?
Well, it's my machine.
Machinery? Okay.
Yeah.
What makes our machinery
Continue on
better?
all night.
You can run it all night? Okay. True.
What was your question?
How has the improvement in energy density changed the way we make things compared to 200 years ago? How do we make
Food production, tractors.
food production? A lot of energy. So if you look at the amount of energy that went into food production 200 years ago, I guess you have to, you feed your horse to pull the plow, if that's your energy, I guess. But not a lot. Cooking, you're using wood and whatever.
We use lasers now, and it's more concentrated and intense for cutting things. They didn't have lasers back then.
That's right. Now we have lasers, we can zap weeds with lasers. It's gonna be great. It's an interesting thing. People, say, I don't want all these pesticides to be used. I'm going to buy organic and so forth. It's much more expensive and so forth. You can zap all the weeds, then there we go.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even need those pesticides. Auto industry, robots are making cars, robots used in health industry for surgery. So, yeah, agriculture, whereas today you got, we talked about before, the tractor, the refrigeration, the transport, so much more energy. That's just one example of how what we're looking at is not what Adam Smith talked about. Adam Smith said, what makes us so great is that unlike a dog, which can't trade a bone with other dog, we can trade with another human being. Now, what do you have to do to be able to trade with another human being? What's the prerequisite for that?
Production.
You have to have something to trade, right? So that's a little bit more important, I'd say, than how do you trade it or move it around, is what did you produce? How did you produce it?
How do you produce or extract something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's LaRouche's view of economy. Economic value is in improving the productive powers of labor, to borrow a phrase from Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton said manufacturing, because this was a dispute at the time. Jefferson, for example, said, manufacturing, that's just a fad, agriculture, that's where real value is made. Hamilton said, no, you're wrong. Manufacturing technologies, they improve the productive powers of labor. It's technology that lets one person accomplish more with the same amount of work in their day. That's the source of economic growth. So I want to end my part here with a quote from LaRouche on this, I think, spinning. So, could I have a Lyndon LaRouche reader, please?
The first lesson which any person who would be a competent economist must now master is the importance of rejecting the population delusion that mankind's inhabiting the planet Earth or any particular territory within Earth signifies the delusion that man is merely living within the bounds of nature. Man, if he is productive, is changing his habitation as by a higher authority than nature otherwise defined. That as if from above.
So notice this phrase here about man living within the bounds of nature. And it seems like LaRouche has a different idea of this than David Attenborough did. What does LaRouche think about the bounds of nature?
It's bullshit.
Yeah, right.
That we are above it, that we are the authority over nature.
All right, let's see what he says next.
I wonder if people agree with that.
Do people agree with that? Should we say there are no bounds to nature? We don't care. Man supersedes the bounds, says Mary Jane. And
Well, isn't the universe finite also?
isn't the universe finite?
Yeah. I mean,
Is it not also unbounded? And what does it mean, unbounded?
I've heard that, but I don't know what that means.
Present?
Well, are we gonna, yeah, right. Is there a fixed amount of resources? So this is one of the ideas that kind of depresses people is thermodynamics, the laws of thermodynamics and the way that they get applied. So the laws of thermodynamics says that first off, there's a fixed amount of energy in the whole universe. Never going to be any more. There's a certain amount, that's it. Second law says, as you're using that energy, it always turns into a less useful form. So, for example, a car, it moves you forward, but it's also just producing heat. And what do you do with some warm exhaust? Nothing. So it's a sort of a scientific universal view that goes along with the idea of the Club of Rome that says there's limits to growth. We're going to run out of resources. So whether that's going to happen over the scale of the entire universe, maybe that's a different question. But look, it doesn't apply to human beings. I don't think the total amount of energy in the universe is known. And if we had tried to estimate it 150 years ago, we would have been missing something. What would we have been missing 150 years ago if we wanted to estimate the total energy in the universe?
Nuclear power is
Nuclear power. We didn't even know that existed.
unlimited
Right.
resource.
Right.
We didn't even know we could split the atom.
Didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Right. Nuclear reactions, 1,000,000 times more energy than a chemical reaction. 1,000,000 times more. Nobody knew about that when the laws of thermodynamics were written. So did we change the amount of energy in the universe? Did we change the amount of energy available to us in the universe? And then the follow-up, are we ever going to be done discovering new things? Maybe there'll always be more.
Got a lot of comments there.
Yep. Samantha, I disagree. I don't think we have a right to rule over other creatures. Sarah, are we saying humankind rules over nature? Samantha, we speak of not being pro-slavery, but if we simply use nature to our advantage, aren't we hypocrites? Sarah, I find that notion a little discomforting. Wouldn't it be better to live within the bounds of nature or see ourselves as caretakers of it? Well, we should certainly be caretakers. I mean, we should make nature better. I mean,
If people want to talk, they can raise their hands, by the way. We'll let them unmute. That's one thing I forgot. I was like, what's different about this one? It's like, oh yeah, because people on Zoom aren't talking. Because I made it so they can't unmute. But if they want to,
well, raise your hand if you do want to.
yeah, if Sarah or Samantha, you want to be heard, and you're welcome to unmute.
Or others.
Or others.
I mean, one thing is about, I mean,
Raise your hand.
how fair is nature? How fair does it treat things? I mean, you know, let's say that the surface of the earth, the land surface, there was no life on that.
What do you mean?
Well, the first life was in the crust of the earth or in the oceans.
Yeah.
And then eventually life moved to land. How did the land feel about that?
Did the land complain?
Did anybody ask the rocks?
They colonized the land.
They colonized the land.
Yeah,
Made it their slaves.
Over time, species come, species go. Types of life, they come, they go. I mean, what's constant over evolutionary or biological time? Not much. Like change. Change is what's happening. It's always changing. It's always improving. So do we live with nature? Yes. Does the natural environment have importance for us? Sure does. Should we make it better as opposed to polluting it? Absolutely. We shouldn't have dirt and filth and pollution. So I don't see I guess you might ask, what's good for nature? If there's a desert and we're desalinating ocean water and bringing in water, and then it's blooming, there's light. Now there's birds eating the berries. You know, there's all it's blossoming, it's growing. Is nature happy about that? Is nature unhappy about that? Should we be happy about that? Unhappy about it? I mean, maybe the scorpions are angry, but
Jason, can we organize nature to be happy with that?
can we organize nature to be happy with it? Lynn's language is kind of, I don't know how hard to extract what you're saying there. Well, let's do this. This is a great topic. Let's finish this quote because Lynn's going to continue about what his view is of our relationship to nature, and then
We can have it.
and then we'll open up totally. So, okay, let's continue the quote. Next reader, please.
If this practice culture is truly productive, man is depleting the richest of those practically accessible resources he employs as natural resources. But nonetheless, man must be constantly increasing the productive powers of labor per capita and per square kilometer of relevant territory, such that the typical individual is more productive and richer with the new, relatively poorer resources than with the relatively richer earlier resources.
Can anybody come up with an example of this? So what's he saying here, Jose?
You're not supposed to do that to me. You're supposed to do that to anyone else.
Demonstrated it to such good effect.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying here that we have to figure out new ways in which we increase the productivity of labor, and that we take the most, I guess, potential out of every square kilometer. That we could, like, whatever we could do in 1 square kilometer, we have to continuously increase the effectiveness of how we employ the resources and in that 1 square kilometer.
Yeah, so there's a contrast here. There's a but on the 4th line. What's the contrast?
Well, he's saying if this practice culture is truly productive, man is depleting the richest of those practically accessible resources he employs as natural resources. So he's saying, like, if we are productive, we are going to be depleting the riches of those accessible resources.
Okay, so then what's the contrast with that?
But nonetheless, man must be constantly increasing the productive powers of labor per capita per square kilometer of territory, such that the typical individual is more productive and richer with the new, relatively poorer resources than with the relatively richer earlier resources.
So we must use our resources more wisely as they deplete.
We have to use them more wisely. Maybe we have to figure out better ways of getting them, also of reaching them.
More effectively.
Yeah. But there are limits within that 1 square kilometer. Yeah, at any point in in human history, there's limits to how many people can live in a certain area, how productive a certain area could be. It's that over economic history, over historical time, over technological time, that number changes. But there is at any certain level of culture and scientific knowledge and so forth. Yeah, there's definitely.
Would you say that that's the potential relative population density
That
of
is.
that area?
That's
The actual
exactly.
definition.
Yep, that's a potential population density. Okay, moving on. Yep, okay, next reader, please.
In the known history of cultures, this increasing of net productivity per capita and per square kilometer is associated with a long wave trend toward increase of the relative energy flux density of the modes of heat work employed, moving upward from the poorest quality of general resources, such as sunlight, impinging on what is conventionally classified as our planet at planet's surface, to the improvement of the net energy flux density accomplished as the work of chlorophyll and the related role of increased use of that carbon atom, which plays such a crucial role in the possibility of life, especially human life. We progress from burning of trash to charcoal to coal to coke to petroleum and natural gas, and then leap into the much more powerful energy flux densities of nuclear and thermonuclear power.
So he's talking even about energy flux density in life. He brought up chlorophyll. How does chlorophyll, first off, can anyone say what chlorophyll is and how does it change what life can do? What is life like pre-chlorophyll and then with chlorophyll? What's the new era? What changed?
Well, it takes in oxygen and sunlight, creates sugar, right? And exerts oxygen, I'm sorry, it takes in carbon dioxide and sunlight, and then it outputs sugar for itself and breathes out oxygen. So it changed the atmosphere from carbon dioxide to oxygen.
Okay, creates oxygen in the atmosphere, creates food for the plant. So this is solar power, right? Life developed solar power using the sunlight to create its food. That's an amazing invention.
Yeah,
It's pretty great.
that really did something great with that.
So
Millions of years ago.
Yeah, right. So, even in life, and then over evolutionary time, life uses more elements of the periodic table. It keeps expanding what it's able to do. Okay, and we saw those transitions of energy at the end here. All right, next reader, please. And there are only two more slides.
It is the increase of the application of a certain energy flux density per capita as distributed in one or several particular portions per square kilometer of territory, which is not the only principled course for the improvement of the condition of human life. Without such increases in energy flux density, human life on this planet must necessarily deteriorate, ultimately to the point of a large degree of genocide against the planet's population as a whole. A contrary policy, such as those of today's neo-Malthusian fanatics, such as the World Wildlife Fund's Prince Philip et al., would be clearly and criminally insane in its effects.
What does that mean?
I know. I'm just reading it.
The neglect of the principles and what causes genocide,
The
neglect of these principles like potential relative population density and the need to continually make technological advances and maintain it. which comes from new technological advances. Is that what causes genocide?
He's saying if you don't
Yeah,
make these developments, like
I
you
mean,
say,
the neglection of that.
if you neglect that, then you're gonna run out of, the resources are gonna be depleted. You are gonna run out, you are gonna get poor, and then the level of population that can be supported is going to decrease. What happens if the potential population density reaches the actual population? And let's say the potential population keeps decreasing,
Mass die off.
so is the actual population. So,
So the World Wildlife Fund does not want technological advance.
no, I don't think so. Well, I don't, there's many people that are part of that, but definitely don't want, people. I mean, a lot of this stuff, they say, well, the biggest environmental problem is just people. If we have people, we're gonna have problems, so we should have fewer people, and that's the best way to solve everything.
Absolutely. So, do people have questions, discussion? I mean, do we want to keep talking more about Samantha, Sarah, you guys were most vocally opposed to, cutting down all the trees and replacing it with tarmac. So if you'd like to.
Which is exactly what LaRouche had in
Which is
mind.
exactly what-
Trees. No.
More parking lot.
And also like animals, I mean, we're different from the animals for sure. I mean, you shouldn't be cruel to animals.
Yeah.
I mean,
Definitely not.
no.
Sarah raised her hand.
All right, great. There we go. I'll unmute her.
Okay, hi. So I just
Can we
wanted
hear
to
her? Oh,
No.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait, I think I have to.
Yeah, hold on. Go for it.
can I be heard? Okay, so I just want to try to make sure I understand what we just said or what Lynn is saying, that the best way to use the resources on the planet is to create national great projects that enable us to live more efficiently with the resources that we have. But what is, like, we're using the World Wildlife Fund as an example of what not to do, but they ostensibly say that they want to protect nature. So what is it about their approach that is so, again, in conflict with what we're trying to what we're aiming for?
That's a perfect question. Perfect question. I want to emphasize. Well, so, I mean, what's wrong with, World Wildlife Fund, liking wildlife, wanting a clean environment? Of course, that's good things. I mean, there's some wildlife I could do with less of, deer, mosquitoes,
Deer ticks.
ticks,
Yeah.
yeah. Any bug that transmits a horrible disease, that should, I'm definitely okay, more than okay with it going extinct. I think
They're extermination.
it's a challenge for us. It's like nature is saying, hey, you know what? Here's this thing. See if you can figure out how to handle these bugs. They're here to help you learn more. They're here to inspire you to figure something out.
Yeah, how to get rid of.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the way that environmentalism has been used in the past 50, 60 years has not only been for people who truly want to, have national parks and clean places to enjoy and recreation, and so animals have a place to live. Not opposed to that. But the way it got used was as a new form of colonialism. So the World Wildlife Fund, for example, itself was active in Africa, among other places, and encouraging the creation of parks, which parks aren't a bad thing, but the way they did it was from the standpoint that there are too many people. And back in the 60s and 70s, they were definitely saying Africa is where there were too many people. They didn't say, we need to reduce the population of Belgium. What they were saying was there aren't enough resources on this planet to develop the whole thing. And some people who are living in poverty right now are just going to have to stay that way. And there's just not enough to go around. We should reduce the number of people so that we can make do with our limited resources. So it all came from this vision of sort of there being a fixed resource base on the whole planet, and we're using it up and gobbling it up. So we should reduce the number of people, and we should reduce the level of development. We should reduce the economic conditions so we can eke out a longer existence with those limited resources. It's kind of the axiom underlying the thing.
Obama said that. He said if people in Africa had air conditioning in cars, the whole world would burn up.
That is what Obama said.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
and
put the Hitler stash back up.
yeah. So, what do you think, Sarah?
Oh, yeah.
well-
Is Sarah still unmuted?
That was, I mean, there's a whole history.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
Can I say something?
Oh, sorry, hold on.
Samantha's got it.
Samantha,
Okay, go ahead.
Samantha's, I think she just unmuted and then we'll go to you.
Okay, I just okay, so a lot of these organizations I know are fronts for, other more nefarious agendas. But and I don't agree with Malthus and his philosophy really, but and I hate to say stuff like this, but okay, I have a house. Say the world is a house, right? And I have so much food in my refrigerator. And that's all the money I have to spend on that food. And I have 50 people over for dinner. I can't feed all those people for dinner. So in some ways he does make a point. And I don't know what to think about that and how to feel about that because I can see his side, but I also know it's not a very good thing. I just wanted to say that.
You can keep the volume on, by the way. The echo was me because I unmuted here. You can keep her open. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I think there's one kind of axiom that you're talking about, Samantha, which is that if you think of the world as just like a refrigerator with limited food in it, well, yeah, of course you're not going to be able to feed everybody, or you might not be able to feed everybody over and over again, right? But I think going off of some of the graphs that Jason was showing about, we have an increase in human population. So we're at over 8 billion people right now. And yet, even with that increase, the amount of land for farming that we use per person, it's gone down. And I think in the United States too, like the amount of farms that we have has actually gone down. Now that's bad. But also we are able to, I've spoken to a lot of farmers who say we can feed the world 3 times over just from the farms in the United States. Right. So I don't believe that we have limited resources. You look at China, for example, they have 1.3 billion people. It's almost 3 times the population of the United States, or more than 3 times the population of the United States. And they were able to lift everybody out of poverty. So there's nobody in extreme poverty in China anymore. How can that be? And I think it's because you don't have a planet that has limited resources. You might, but you have your best resource, which is human creativity. Jason, what was that thing you talked about? How we used to produce lamps with whale oil?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, one of the big reasons for whale mining, not mining, but whaling. So is that all that fat would be turned into a really wonderful oil for use in lamps at home because it burned really clean. And like the world whale population was devastated to make lighting. So you think about, well, with electricity and electric lights, no one's hunting whales to light up their house at night. It's kind of the interesting thing about how technology saves. I mean, think about the trees. If we had never used coal, we would have cut down all the trees on the planet by now. We would have needed them for energy. But we have coal and petroleum and nuclear, so that because there's not an unlimited amount of coal in the earth. That's for sure. Look, limits to growth. It's wrong to say that there are limits to growth. It's also wrong to say that there aren't limits to growth. It's the trouble with the words. Sometimes they don't really have just one meaning. Are there limits to human growth? Yes, but they're ones that we set. So at a certain stage, there's limits, for sure. You'd say, if we stayed like this, we're going to run out in this amount of time, like the Club of Rome said, and they would have been right. Except after they wrote their book, we didn't stop discovering new things. So we kept changing what those limits are. And what can we do as a society, as a global mission for humanity to transform those limits, not just for the goal of increasing the population forever and ever, but also for increasing what we're able to do. Do we have the energy to be able to go out and explore space? Are we going to be able to defend the planet from asteroid that eventually is going to come and hit us and kill everything, like what happened to the dinosaurs, that's on us to figure out. And we need a lot more energy to be able to take on that kind of challenge.
Okay, so Nancy, and then.
Do you have a response? You want to ask if she has a response?
Oh, Samantha, did you have a response?
I think my only response to that would be sort of, isn't the Club of Rome kind of still in charge, or the people that are associated with it are still sort of in charge? So how do we overcome that whole elite system there? I can't foresee a way to overcome it practically, on a practical level.
Yeah, because it's very insidious. Like sometimes bad ideas are sort of clearly bad and they're imposed by force. Okay, like did people in the US generally think the Iraq War was a good idea? No, but it happened. Just digging back in history here. Obviously more recent things. It happened again. I forgot where I was going. Yeah.
How to fight the oligarchy.
Oh yeah, right. So sometimes it's a bad thing that's imposed by force. Sometimes it's a bad thing that you get people to adopt on their own. And this green ideology is a big one. I mean, think about the Fridays for the Future and the school walkouts and the 13-year-olds marching and saying we demand climate action because we only have however many years. That time has already passed. Okay, the world didn't end. So people believe they're doing something useful, but they're actually limiting their potential. So environmentalism is used that way in a big way because there's part of it that's of course good. We want clean conditions, but how is that good intention used to drive a policy that prevents development?
Right. Yeah, I think about countries in Africa or South and Central America that just don't get approved for loans for development unless it's for green energy. Like why is it that, and this is one of the things that I really liked about El Salvador, because El Salvador before Bukele was like a very poor nation and their hospitals were horrible. Now it has one of the largest hospitals in all of Central America, where before a mother who was pregnant and had to, go through labor might have died, just in the last 10 years. And now because of, they decided, well, you know what, fuck the IMF and fuck the World Bank. We're just going to develop anyway because we have a right to make sure that our people can live a healthy life. Now the infant mortality rate has gone down, and they brought potable water to every municipality in El Salvador when it used to only be available to 50% of communities. Now you can go anywhere and you can get clean water, because they just said, we're just going to develop. And, we're not gonna listen to people who tell us that we deserve to be poor and we deserve to be malnourished for the sake of the environment. So,
yeah. I mean, there's this whole idea that's just this racist idea called appropriate technology. Appropriate technology. It's so condescending. So my first exposure to this was in college, and I was interested in, developing the world and everything. And there was a class on this, and so I went to it, and it was all about basically saying, well, you know what? Some places they're just going to stay poor. So instead of bringing in power plants, how can you make a bike carry more cargo? So like the challenge was, how can we redesign this bike to carry more buckets of wheat? It's like this is the plan for helping the world develop bikes.
So ironic.
I mean, nothing wrong with bikes, but it's what you're not doing. So they said that's what's appropriate for those people. Sick.
Oh, retro.
all right, so we got Nancy, then we got Estevao, and then Asika.
Maybe this is too long for a discussion for this class, but maybe something to take up in the future. But I wanted to say something about conservation, because my generation went through the first of the brainwashing of the green thing was conservation. We went from TV commercials that said, use more energy, buy this, electric this, electric that. And then all of a sudden, one year, it was this little dog running around going, off, turn everything off. Conserve, right? Conserve. We were told we were going to run out of gasoline in 1975? Yeah, we had a gas shortage. It was going to be no more gas. So this whole concept of conservation, but how damaging this is, because in fact, that quote from LaRouche there, where he's talking about increasing the energy flux density, And this is either in his economics book, or maybe it's in the No Limits to Growth book, or maybe both. But you have to actually consume at a faster rate. You have to consume resources at a faster and more intense rate to survive. If you merely conserve, you will die. And the point of it, if you have to think about how the whole picture works, that when obviously you use a resource, it does get depleted with that technology. So you have to develop a new technology to get it. You have to develop the lasers for mining or whatever. But how do you develop lasers? Well, you have to have a higher standard of population or higher standard of living for your population. You have to have more people going to higher education to come to the next idea. Well, what does that take? Well, that's more schools, more hospitals, more roads, more bridges, more farms, more food, more everything. So you have to constantly, you either increase your population at a higher standard of living, using up resources, or you will die.
Yep.
You will die out.
And let me,
Anyway, I know there's more to this, but that's the
I just want to
concept
add
of
the
the
parallel to
disaster.
using more
Yeah.
resources and creating more resources,
Yeah,
right? Because this is why we need nuclear fusion. We
Right.
need, because we can't
I was
just use coal.
right, yeah.
I was just about to say, like, you think about it, helium-3 is such a great resource, and we only have barely tapped into what it can actually do. We only know we have an understanding that fusion can produce much more energy than just the standard nuclear power plants that are off of fission right now. So fission is you split an atom, and usually like a higher number of proton atom, like uranium or something. And then when you split that in half, that creates a large, amount of energy. And you produce more energy through fusion when you take two lower elements like helium and you push them together, with a lot of energy, you create a nuclear fusion reaction, which produces much more energy output. But what the Chinese are theorizing now is that helium-3, which, is a very potent resource, because current helium right now has 2 protons and 2 neutrons, right? So the stuff you fill up the balloons with, 2 protons, 2 neutrons. And when they do fuse together, you do have some nuclear waste because of the excess neutrons. I think it's something that the neutrons don't cancel out, right? And so when they bang into each other, you do get some waste. Whereas with helium-3, which is composed of 2 protons and 1 neutron, and when both of these atoms hit together and they fuse, there's no nuclear waste. I think it has something to do with the fact that just both neutrons come together and the element that they form, is a stable element and there's no nuclear waste. Is that right, Jason?
Yeah, so instead of deuterium and tritium, which is the normal way that these fusion devices operate, that means 2 hydrogen nucleons, one with 1 neutron and one with 2. When you put them together, you get a helium-4 plus a neutron. Trouble with neutrons is, since they're neutral, they don't care about electric or magnetic fields. So if you've got a fusion device that's holding all of this, basically sun inside a fixed area, it does it with electricity and magnetism. The neutrons just go flying out. Helium-3, which we could mine on the moon, gets combined with proton, and it results in normal helium. Wait, I'm sorry, and a deuterium. You put that together and you end up with an extra proton. So the proton, the resulting helium, they're all charged. They can be controlled by electric magnetic fields. So they're not going to damage your equipment, and you can turn them directly into electricity. Right. Otherwise, like the current ones that are these test facilities, the way they're going to make electricity is by making the device hot and boiling water and blowing steam through a turbine. It's a bit old fashioned. Helium-3 would be better.
And you only need you only need so much helium-3. Like, you don't need buckets and buckets and buckets of helium-3 to power cities. You could, and there's like tons of it on the moon. Like, the moon's surface is just covered in this resource. So the work that'll take to go up to the moon, mine it, which, we know the scientist who's involved in the schematic, who built the prototype of like mining helium-3 on the moon and then bringing it back. Like, yeah, that's going to cost a lot of money, but you're talking about like 2 or 3 canisters about yay big could power New York City. you know, for a very long time. You know, as opposed to, you know, gas or petroleum or something like that. You know, so our means of producing energy and our energy efficiency with such little resource can produce so much energy is only going to get better and better and better as humanity progresses. Like I'm sure we're going to discover something that's even more potent than nuclear fusion. And then we're going to discover something that's more potent than whatever that is. You know, and I think that that's exciting. So anyway, that'll be covered in our third class. All right, we got another 10 minutes or so. So let's go here to Esteval and then Asaka.
And then Lynn.
And then Lynn. Speed. Oh, you had your hand raised?
Yeah.
Well, you're in the back of the queue. All right. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Estevan. I am speaking from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So it's a pleasure to be here. And the object of my discussion with you guys would be, of course, touching on these topics that all the speakers before me rose questions about, which is about energy and resources and how can we take care of the environment. But my question is more about how can we reconcile this drive for development and ethical decisions? Because in the 19th century, we have a lot of historical examples where, especially European nations, they were so focused on development and progress. And using that, they could do so much catastrophic decisions. So, for example, yes, I believe and I agree with LaRouche when he says that we have to continually focus on technology and raise the standards living of people through energy, through we using better or resources. That's fine. But what's the cost of that? I mean, I think that's the question. For example, here in Brazil, we have the thing that you mentioned, Ross, electricity, hydroelectrical power plants to generate electricity. But for you to construct this power plant, it generates and it requires a lot of resources, especially socially speaking. You have to flood entirely territories. And sometimes on these territories, you have people living there and you have to displace them. And sometimes for you doing these kind of constructions, you got to imply a lot of labor. And sometimes the labor rights are not obeyed or not, taken into consideration. So on the LaRouche movement, how can we reconcile this drive for development that we need to attain, but also without not overlooking ethical decisions, especially about the labor of people, the rights of people, sometimes as people mention the environment. How can we create a balance between these two poles?
I think one of the most important parts is national sovereignty on this. So let's take a particularly terrible resource for workers, namely cobalt. A lot of kids in the DRC are involved in cobalt mining. They're small. Many of them die. People are injured. It's extremely unsafe. It's very expensive in human terms. Now, if the country were overall more developed, you wouldn't have kids being willing to do this because you'd be able to have different opportunities. If you had a government that was able to enforce protections for people and also the environment. I mean, we shouldn't pollute things, of course. I mean, so what you're saying about like the growth in the 40s and the 50s, there were definitely mistakes made. Waste was thrown into rivers. That's bad. It's much better. They're cleaner now. Lead and gasoline, good thing we don't do that anymore. So there are definitely some fixes there. So anyway, that's one thing is having a strong nation makes it harder to take advantage of people by a big mining company. This was part of what Henry Kissinger had in mind when he wrote a national security study memorandum in the 70s. Is that right?
Yep.
70s.
200.
NSSM 200, where he said that population growth in a number of nations is a threat to the US because if these countries grow and develop, they're going to start using their resources, but we want them. So we should hinder their development, so it's easier for us to extract from them. So in a sense, development makes it possible to protect people. I mean, even in the United States, the Great New Deal projects, the Bay Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, the completion of the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hoover Dam, people died building these things. Right? I mean, dozens of people died building the Hoover Dam, I believe. That doesn't happen on construction sites in the same way today. It's much safer with more development. As far as some of these choices, you're right. There are choices that have to be made. With hydro, you are making the choice sometimes to displace people. So I don't know what kind of blanket one size fits all advice anyone could give on that. You kind of have to look at each situation and work it out. I know when China built the Three Gorges Dam, there were thousands of people that had to be relocated. But also preventing the flooding on the river certainly saved as many lives as the people who had to move into, new buildings that were built for them, and frankly nicer than where they had been living. Sometimes you have to make choices like that.
Same thing at Tennessee.
Tennessee, the Tennessee Valley Authority, right? Sometimes you have to move things, move schools. And remember, there was a graveyard, I think, that was to be flooded. They actually moved. They moved the remains, I believe, so people could still visit.
Yeah, well, think about like a concrete example here in the United States, the Bronx. Public housing is collapsing to the point that, like, I don't know if you can save it. I genuinely don't know if the public housing, which has been in disarray for so long, if that can be saved or not, because it's just collapsing. The facades are collapsing, the boiler systems are all old, and the entire sewage system in New York City is just so old at this point.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to ask the serious question: are we just gonna have to just like demolish these buildings and then rebuild them?
Yeah.
And then what do you do with the people? Well, then you have to build alternate housing somewhere else, house them there temporarily while you destroy and rebuild the housing. But then the question is like, well, in China, you don't really have much of a choice, right? Because they're just going to do it because that's just the kind of government they have. In the United States, people have a right to protest that. People have a right to fight against that if they want to, right?
In fact, it stops a lot of things from being great.
It's
advantage of that.
So, but my point is, it's like, you're gonna have to. How do you put trust into people again that they are being temporarily, relocated, to know that in 6 months to a year their housing will be rebuilt again, when right now it takes 15 years to build a fucking interborough train line between Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, with rail lines that already exist.
That was promised in the 80s.
That was promised in the 80s. So it's like, oh, don't worry, we're gonna temporarily relocate you, and you'll have housing again. Maybe your grandchildren will live in.
Your grandchildren will be able to move in.
Like, right? Because then it's just, anyway. I'm just saying, like, I'm just trying to think about, how can I tell somebody like we're gonna have to destroy your public housing in order to rebuild it when they don't even trust the government to begin with.
That's the problem.
So anyway, okay, so we have Asika, Lynn, and then Robert, and I would ask that people keep their comments short just because we're at almost time. So, but go ahead, Asika, I will unmute you.
Hi. To the last statement you made, Jose, I thought about it. In the United States, this might be the only occasion where we could use Hollywood stars for good purposes.
Or you could what?
But
You could
use Hollywood stars.
Hollywood stars? You want Tom Cruise to come to the Bronx and say, "Hey, we're gonna relocate you all right?" You're gonna. I would feel offended.
What I wanted to show was a chart that I found recently about Club of Rome's population projection for sub-Saharan Africa. And this was really shocking to me. This is a Club of Rome population projection from 1950 to 2100. And they have a whole carve. I wish if I could share this, but basically this shows by year 2100, population of sub-Saharan Africa would decline to 950 million people. Africa right now is like 1.5 billion. So that's the projection, and you ask yourself, how many Hitlers and Netanyahu's do you need to accomplish this?
Okay. Yeah, that's quite an insight. Thank you, Asika. Do you have anything to say on that?
No, I mean, well, just the point that you can kill an awful lot of people by preventing development.
Yeah.
Not as obvious as Hitler, but it's deadly.
All right. Lynn?
This I think is gonna be more for sort of, I hope, future discussions, because it's like too much, but one thing that was implied in what was presented or indicated was the actual process of development in nature. I say that sort of in quotes, where you're getting constantly more differentiation, more potential, etc. So for example, in what I guess Jason showed with the first chart with the actual increase, massive increase, almost exponential increase in terms of the numbers and types of species, of mammal species. And then the other thing where you showed the chlorophyll and what that meant. So there's a process in quote nature itself. And I put that in quotes because of my next point, which is that part of what the way in which, and I think this is part of how people have to think about the axioms and the brainwashing, where human beings are being discussed as if there was a break between nature and human beings, right? So we keep talking about it as almost in opposition. And the question is, are human beings natural? Are they part of nature? I mean, that's something people have to consider. Where do we come from? And then the final thing, which it really begs the question that Lynn raised many, many times, which is what is it that set human beings apart from, and I would say also above the animals and inorganic nature. So anyway, those are the 3 points, which I don't think we're really going to have time to fully discuss, but I hope we can in future classes.
Great. Are human beings natural? That's a good question.
It was actually a very good question.
All righty, Robert, you will be our last comment question for the day. You can unmute.
Okay, how are you guys? How's everybody doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay, I'm in your district, or well, I guess I should say I was in your district in the Bronx. I'm originally from Harlem. I spent from the time I was 17, I spent a lot of time in the military. First Army doing Nam, then I went to City University, then I went in the Navy. And the reason why I'm so impressed with your candidacy is because half my time in the Navy, I spent in an organization called DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, which if anyone is knowledgeable about how our government works, DIA is the flip side. We're the military, are the military flip side of CIA. And I've been attending off and on while I was stationed at the White House and then the Pentagon. I attended quite a few Lyndon LaRouche meetings. And I noticed what they tried to do. They tried to say that, well, the LaRouche people are a bunch of crazy idiots. And I never thought that that was the case. Anybody that talks about FDR the way that LaRouche did, and looking at the situation that we have in America now, no, that man was not crazy. Now, to get to the point, as far as what you're talking about, in terms of I call it destabilization and the ripping off of Africa. And I never want to say that I'm an authority. I came over here this past June 19th with the idea to try and start like a video thing. I think I sent you guys a couple of the things that I've spoken about, that I'm interested in. And along the way, I wound up getting married to a young girl in Uganda. So I don't know when I'll be able to come back home. I hope in December or January, but I want to do as much as I can to help you out. I did some investigation and I found out that our present congressman in the 15th district, and I think people need to know this guy is basically owned by APAC. Richie Torres is a very nice young man, very television photogenic, but he offers nothing for the people of the Bronx. Now, I grew up in Harlem. I wound up going to the Bronx because after I came back from the Gulf War, I found out I couldn't afford to live in the neighborhood I grew up in. That's how I wound up living in the Bronx. And he hasn't really done a damn thing for the people in the 15th district. And I'm sitting up here, and this is the first time I've really had to listen to you in depth. And, I wish that a year ago or before that, Richie had done things like what you guys are doing now to try and inform the people. No, we don't have a bunch, as you know as well as I do, we ain't got a bunch of Rhodes Scholars, right? Walking up and down the Bronx. But I like the way that you present things so that the average Bronxite could understand what the hell is going on. And let me cap it up because I know time is at a premium. I really fear living in Uganda that what I see happening in South Africa, which is, just generally speaking, right down the road from where I am in Kampala, that it seems that Trump and his corporate minions, with possibly a couple of CIA types or former CIA types, are trying to destabilize South Africa. I believe it's because of the fact that South Africa is one of the mainstays of what we call the BRIC nations. And to me, this crystallizes everything that Lyndon LaRouche was talking about in terms of Britain and the United States. And don't get me wrong, I'm an Anglophile at heart, but that does not prevent me from recognizing some of the evil things that the British Empire has done, especially here in Southern Africa. And I do believe that their move is to really destabilize the government of South Africa because they want those resources. And when people talk about this, I hope I said this right, Malthusian idea about, oh, we have too many people. No, it's not a question of having too many people. What you want to do, you want to put your grubby hands on the natural resources of what you have here on the African continent. Because one of the things that brought me over here was because Africa is the future of this planet. And I want to see Africa used in the right way, where people are treated with respect, they're treated with partners, excuse me, as partners, and not the colonial bullshit that a lot of these African nations are just really starting to get over. And I just wanted to get that off my chest. But yeah, man, I'm right on with what you folks are doing. And even though I'm here in New York, hey man, I didn't know you was running. I came over here, I got over here June 19th. And then just a few weeks later, I found out about your candidacy and got really serious about what Mondami is doing. So I do apologize for that. And then I don't know, I messed around. I told them I got married. So that's what's happening. But God bless you all. Peace.
Well, Robert, that was a very, very kind and an excellent comment at which we can end our class on, Robert. I'm glad that you're a constituent because you are an exemplar of everyone who will vote for me in the 15th congressional district. And I do want to kind of, first of all, I mean, I don't try to make this understandable for the average Bronxite because I believe that the average Bronxite is capable of understanding as much as the average Harvard person. And honestly, maybe people who go to Harvard might be a little less intelligent than the people of the Bronx. But I understand what you mean. I was kind of like, okay, the way I oriented this class was this is going to be the first time people are even hearing about Lyndon LaRouche. They're coming around because of the campaign. And also because a lot of my policies are based off of the organization and what he has done. So I definitely I just want to echo again, thank you very much, Robert, for what you said. And I want to read you something that you'll appreciate. This is from Malcolm X in December of 1964, and he's talking about a few different things about our tactics and whatnot and what we need to do in organizing. But in 1964, he says, look at the continent of Africa today and see what position it occupies on this earth. And you realize that there's a tussle going on between East and West. It used to be between America and the West and Russia, but they're not tussling with each other anymore. And so then he starts talking about Kennedy making a satellite out of Russia, and he put Khrushchev in his pocket, so on and so forth. But he goes on to talk more and more about that the nations in Africa are developing systems to solve their problems irrespective of the West. And that in the next 50 years, it's going to be one of the most important centers on the earth. And look at it today, everything you just talked about, how the Trump administration is trying to, sabotage the South African government. Or you have, for example, Ibrahim Traoré with Burkina Faso, where he is uniting Niger and Mali, and they're kicking out the French colonial powers, right? What did you say?
Sahel nation.
Yeah, the Sahel nations, there is a lot of great potential coming out of the continent of Africa right now. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the influence of what the LaRouche organization has done over the course of the last 50 years in promoting these ideas. And of course, also, I will not discount at all the role that Thomas Sankara played in, standing up for Africa to develop its independence. And so I think as somebody who's running for Congress, I would like to aid in that effort to see a real United States of Africa at some point, or a united Africa in whatever form or shape that takes place, because they will have to work with the rest of the world. And at that point, we can really develop the principles of mutual development and sovereignty. And we won't be meddling in other people's countries anymore and overthrowing their leadership. And I'm honestly optimistic about the next generation of the world that's coming in now, because I think imperialism and oligarchy are dying. They're dying. And we have to be the Van Helsings of the world, where we have to put the stake in the vampire's heart and the stake of the oligarchy's heart, metaphorically, of course. And I think the way to do that is by supporting the BRICS nations and getting the US involved. So I want to thank you, Robert, for coming on the Zoom call. I want to thank everybody for coming on the Zoom call for our first class. We'll be here again, same time next week, next Sunday. Thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions, you can email Jason, because he's the expert here on any and all things that Lyndon LaRouche ever said on anything whatsoever. So thank you all.
Okay.
All right.
I do have a question.
Recording.